All right, friends, we're back with another COVID cabal. Another COVID cabal periscope. Gotta get the intense, gotta get the intense voiceover here. Another intense COVID cabal periscope. Guys, crazy energy today, right? Crazy energy. And you know what's funny? Somebody sent me the Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance, it was like all four bars shot up significantly today. There's a lot of energy. People were feeling the stress. People were feeling the adrenaline. You know, got into it a little bit with Ali. Guys, this isn't a big deal. Don't go hard on Ali. Don't say anything negative to him. He's doing God's work right now. It's an incredibly stressful situation. I mean, when you're organizing rallies around the country, he's really in the thick of things. Um, it's when you're putting that much effort into stuff and you're seeing corrupt people swatted away. It's really, I mean, I have a lot of empathy. I have a lot of compassion, and he's doing fine. He's not getting any sleep. I know he's not getting any sleep. We have a lot of mutual friends not getting any sleep at all. So when you're not getting any sleep and you're suffering a lot of setbacks, it's understandable that you're going to get stressed out. But we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. You know me. I'm not stressed out. I'm not stressed out about this stuff. So, but first we got to talk about day two of New Zealand wine. So we did Sauvignon Blanc last time, and I did comparisons of two Sauvignon Blancs from the famous Marlborough, where all of that's where half of the wine in New Zealand comes from. Well, even though New Zealand also produces Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, probably a bunch of other little random stuff too. I wanted to focus on the other varietal that I felt like really was of significance, because you can grow a lot of good stuff in New Zealand, but we want to do things here. If you want to learn about a country, you want to learn about the things that make it special. So I'm actually really excited for this tasting. I did Pinot Noirs from the two primary locations in New Zealand for Pinot Noir: Martinborough in the North Island and Central Otago in the Southern Island. So this is really cool. They compete against each other routinely in competitions, these two locations. I've never done a side by side comparison of them, so I'm learning as much in this process as you guys are. So a little bit of a breakdown. We'll first talk about Martinborough. So Martinborough is right here, and you can see on the Northern Islands, right? Where is this stuff? It's right here. So right southern kind of tip of the Northern Islands. Okay. This is a very anomalous region. So the soil is very poor here. It's very much like Burgundy. The wines are a lot more delicate. The Pinot Noir is a lot more delicate, and it has a very, very long autumn, which is one of the reasons why it's able to ripen. Actually, it's kind of a cooler area. It's not it's very cool like Burgundy. It's in a certain sense it's almost marginal just due to the microclimates there. Now we contrast that with Central Otago, which is right here. So this is one of the most southern wine regions in the world. It actually might be the most southern wine region in the world. It's right up there with Patagonia and Western Cape in Australia. This is the only continental climate zone in New Zealand. This has very cold winters, so you got to watch out for frost, but it's quite dry, and because of the ozone layer and just because of the fact that it's a continental area, it gets tons and tons of sunlight. So these ones, interestingly enough, despite being really far south, are supposed to be quite poppy, right? They're supposed to have a lot of fruit forward, very, very juicy. So let's try them out. Let's see how they taste. Okay, I gotta say, guys, there's a very specific phenolic that you get in Burgundy, very specific, and only Burgundy Pinot Noir. And this Martinborough has a bit of it. It's one of the things that makes me just absolutely Love Burgundy. It's like a perfect little integration of the oak. So if they're saying that Martinborough is known for being like Burgundy, the only other place I've heard in the world that's like Burgundy is Oregon Pinot Noir. Um, and I mean, yes, that's true. It's closer to that than most other regions. This is really good. This is really good stuff. It's like just a little subtle hit of like butterscotch with with like a bright strawberry. It's really really delicious. Now let's see Central Otago. Let's see this one. You guys can see the labels if you want to check them out. Okay, so Central Otago is good, but I don't think that there's a competition between these two. I don't think there's a competition. The Central Otago one's a little. There's a little bit more juiciness in the fruit, but for being so heavy-handed, there's not enough nuance to it. There's not enough subtlety, and for being so heavy-handed, it's not really. There's not enough flavor for it being so heavy-handed, right? If you're going to be heavy-handed, you want the juice to be really clean. And sorry, the Martinborough takes the cake. Happy to try it again. Happy to do a retaste sometime with these. This is actually a fun one. Um, but man, that Martinborough Pinot Noir, really really high quality stuff. I think both of these clocked in around $20. I don't think I spent much more than 15-20 on these. So even better. All right, guys. Let me get my computer out just for some notes here because we got a lot of good stuff to talk about. So the first thing I want to talk about, I've had a couple of requests to talk about it, and I think it's the main reason why I wanted to even do this to begin with. Because we did one yesterday. We were thinking we were going to wait a little bit longer, but it was a big day energetically. And while I wouldn't say that there was like bombshell, there was a lot of stuff that happened, and I wanted to go into it. The big thing that's on everybody's mind is what happened in Michigan last night. What happened in Michigan? What does it mean? All right. Now, you guys know, you've been following along, so you know my take, my perspective on this stuff. You know that like the lower courts, and this is the one thing I'd say to people who are amazing, fighting the good fight like Ali, they don't mean anything. These things, they don't mean anything. All it is them ratting themselves out. Okay, I know most people watch the MSM. Maybe they buried some of this stuff. The truth is filtering out. It's a good example with Parler. Like conservatives talk about Parler. Okay, Parler is not Parler is good for two reasons. Parler is a good place for people who get banned from Twitter to be able to write things where people who are still on Twitter can take screenshots and send them on the Twitter. Um, Parler's also a good location for kind of conservative movements to coordinate with each other. Parler is not the future of social media. It's kind of like a backdoor area, but things are disseminating. Okay, the boomer Trump supporters, their information's getting spread around. Okay, so what happened in Michigan? Like, let's talk about like the consciousness. All of us are Trump supporters, but there were a lot of people who were thinking Biden won the election, right? There were a lot of Trump supporters who had said Biden won the election. They gave up. And now, do you think as this drags out week after week after week, do you think Trump supporters are starting to think that Trump lost the election? Nope. Nope. And this is why I tweeted before this. Patience is frame control. Okay? There is that beautiful poem, If, by Rudyard Kipling. There is a video produced. I'll retweet it again. They had it with Trump. It's a famous poem about basically as a man keeping keeping your head in the midst of conflict, right? Keeping your head, remaining patient. Okay, patience is frame control. When you see some people get all crazy and they're moving around, they're like freaking out, they're asking questions. A patient person is confident in the outcome, confident to handle whatever comes towards him. There's I was talking a bit about Leo Tolstoy earlier. Yeah, I know, right? It's great how much it's dropped down. Look, if you guys want to get in, now's the time to get in. Um, Leo Tolstoy, in War and Peace, he described, God, it must have been, oh, no, 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 I can't forget this. I can't forget this. I'm forgetting it right now, guys. He is one of you guys can remember. He was a Russian general, and he's the Russian general in charge of the Battle of Schön which is a minor battle, but that Tolstoy focuses on. Um, Guys, I might even have to look it up because this is gonna really annoy me. But basically, this general, Napoleon remarked that he was the only Russian general that he even respected, and this Russian general, basically during the battle, he would go around and you know he'd get reports. Sir, they've attacked us over here. They're pushing us back. And he'd just say, "Very good, very good, very good." And he'd just walk around calmly, and people would say things, and it's like, "Sir, they they attacked us, but we counterattacked over here." You say, "Very good," and the point here was the understanding that this general had of the fact that there can be a lot of chaos in the midst of battle, and that not seeming agitated by anything, being very patient, being willing to wait for results, that actually stabilized everybody, and that as a result, people were able to soldiers gain confidence because they saw the sort of calm, placid, patient demeanor of the general. Okay, and I think that this is the main thing here is we're starting to see which people have leadership abilities and which people don't. All leadership fundamentally has a spiritual grounding because you need to have a confidence that transcends the details. If you get caught up in the blow by blow, you'll lose it all. You'll lose the big picture. So, guys, these lower courts, they don't matter. They don't matter. They're opportunities for Trump to prove to everybody that the system's corrupt. What happened in Michigan last night was things that we would expect to see in a banana republic. It's been said multiple times, but we'll say it again. It's what you expect to see in a banana republic. You have two Republicans on the precinct board who refused to certify the results in Detroit, Wayne County, because there were more people voting than there were people, registered. Nothing added up. It made no sense. They refused to do it. And what happened is you had a bunch of goons and scum. Really, they're scum. And they will pay. Guys, don't you worry. They're going to pay. They're going to pay. They're already in the process of paying for it. They're already backtracking. I didn't know this was doxing. I didn't know it was doxing. Oh, yeah, you didn't know it was doxing? Well, guess what? You're going to find out. You're going to find out what happens. You're lucky you're going to lose. Because if you didn't, if you weren't going to get dealt with through proper channels, these people, they're in very serious shit. They're in very, very serious shit. They doxed the Republican members. And so not just them, their children, really heinous crime. And then Antifa, of course, was on it. So Antifa starts to threaten them. And what happened, right? What happened after that? Again, guys, this Martin Brewer is great. What happened? The Republicans, well, first off, the mic was muted, and apparently they voted behind that, which, again, guys, that's breaking the law. So you can throw out these certifications automatically because they were done under illegal circumstances. You can't mute a meeting where everybody has to see this stuff. But they said, okay, we'll certify it, but you have to do an audit. Okay, and then what? Is the state going to say that you have to do this stuff? Is the state going to say, no, Whitmer's not going to try to do that. It's going to be a disaster. It's going to be a disaster tactically in that situation. But this doesn't matter. And this is what I want people to understand. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Trump has the goods on them. He has everything on them. It's like, why didn't we have people go and Trump could have had people raid the polling stations if he wanted to. Trump could have, I mean, Trump doesn't need to play that kind of game. He's giving them enough rope to hang themselves because he can just take all of this evidence to the Supreme Court and he can wrap more and more people up in it. You're seeing people, Senate Majority Leader, who's a Republican, right, in Michigan, Senate Majority Leader is saying, under no circumstances will we, certify Trump victory in Michigan. Oh, yeah? Well, guess what, dude? You don't get to fucking decide that. You don't get to decide that. Because when Trump wins Michigan by almost double digits, maybe it was even double digits. When Trump wins that state by that much and they have evidence of it, you don't get to fucking decide. But guess what? We get to decide. We get to decide that you're going to jail. We get to decide to check your records to see who's been paying you because we know every rat that's speaking up right now. We know. Yesterday, Trump tweeted that the governor of Georgia was running out of time. And it was ostensibly about the 2 Senate races, but it's not about the Senate races because we know what the governor of Georgia and the Secretary of State have done. We know that they brought Dominion in. We know their family got kickbacks. We know about all this. So they're saying, oh, well, we found 2,600 votes, but that's just an anomaly. And now we find some more for Trump. And all this stuff, by the way, guys, is connected to the Dominion stuff. It's connected to Dominion. Now we're finding other counties. We're finding, 10,000 votes for Biden were actually 1,000 votes. Okay, I'm fudging the numbers. It was like 10,000 something versus 1,000 something. Changed. You guys got to get the big picture here, okay? We have SCOTUS. Please, 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 please do not think of the Supreme Court like some podunk piece of shit local court that's staffed with corrupt liberals. Okay? This is not how it works. It's a very, very different tier of people. And guess what? 3 of the people on the Supreme Court were already in recount elections in 2000. 3 of them were already in recount elections. Barrett, Kavanaugh, and I believe it was Alito. It could have been Garush. One of the 2. They were all in recount elections. Okay? And please do not for a second diminish the divine aspect here. I know, maybe Ginsburg was dead for a long time, right? We can joke about this. We can joke about it. But let's just view it through a basic lens for our perception here. Amy Coney Barrett, again, I've said my pieces on her, but she's light. She glows. She's got that. She's a good person. She's a good, fair person. Okay? She's not a pedo Satanist. And we have 5 reliable members of the court, maybe 6 with Roberts. Roberts would maybe goes, back and forth. It doesn't matter with Roberts, though. It doesn't matter anymore. If we didn't have Amy Coney Barrett, then we could get fucked here because Roberts is compromised. I don't know to what degree he's compromised. Some people claim he was on the Epstein logs. I don't know about that. How many John Roberts are there out there? I don't know that. But it no longer matters. We have Alito, who they've already disobeyed his orders. Doesn't look good for Alito. Alito's not very happy about that. We have Clarence Thomas, who was slandered publicly and accused of rape by Joe Biden. Okay? We have Kavanaugh. I don't have to tell you about Kavanaugh, what that poor man had to go through. No, it's actually not possible more people in Michigan voted for Biden because there's no data to support that whatsoever. Zero data to support that whatsoever, except for the 120% of the voting population who all voted for Biden in Detroit. There's no evidence for that otherwise. And I'm not going to pick on you. I'm going to assume that's an in good faith question. But people have to stop being fucking dumb, and they have to really understand that it's quite. I'm starting to think this is not a good faith question. What about all the polls that showed Biden ahead? You like, dude, you got to wake up to the fact that the people who are putting out the polls were also, of course, wrong. Okay, so let's just make a point here that the polls showed Biden 13 points ahead in Michigan, not behind by 7 or 8 until everything stopped counting at midnight, and then they found 160,000 ballots overnight. So you guys have to be like legitimately, people have to be brain dead at this point to not see it. And I don't have patience for it anymore. I'm going to continue to harp on it. You need to wake the fuck up. You need to wake the fuck up. This is not a drill. This is not good. We are not at the point now. If you can't see it, you have a problem. You have a problem because the evidence is really overwhelming and you have to not want to see it. And you have to think about that. You have to deal with it. You have to deal with that fact. I have no fucking time for your fear. I have no time. None of us have any time for it. We have work to do. They are trying to steal our country, not just the election. They're trying to steal our country. People need to understand it. We are not going to have a country if we allow this to happen. It's not about Trump. It really has little to do with Trump at this point. They want us dead. They are going to try and destroy this entire situation. They're going to try to destroy the entire situation. So it's fine. The truth is going to come out about this because there's going to be trials. It's fine. It's fine. Now, it's going to go to SCOTUS. It's going to go to SCOTUS. But let's just be prepared for the situation that what if it doesn't go to SCOTUS? I was sent a video before this. I watched it really quickly by, Thomas Victor. He's a great guy. And he talked about, well, what if this continues on? There's not going to be a Congress convened. So Pelosi's not going to be, well, Pelosi's already voted out as Speaker of the House. So you have this whole thing, right? You have this whole thing. And basically, there's this sort of expectation that, Congress will be able to take over. Congress is not going to be in session. There's not going to be, and Victor pointing this out was really good. Congress won't be in session because there is no. Pelosi was reelected, but she wasn't reelected as Speaker of the House. But it's actually beyond that because as part of the election fraud and contested stuff is the House and the Senate as well. So there's no House, there's no Senate, there's no president, there's none of this stuff. Now, there's one thing I believe that Victor made a mistake on, and I'm going to offer you some corroborating evidence. Okay, Victor said that Trump is easily going to win the House because he won probably over 400 electoral votes at this point with the amount of votes that were stolen. In Michigan, if he got the vote total he was supposed to get, then you would have, 6 extra House seats plus the Senate seat, plus everything in California, plus across the board, tons of House seats would be flipping. New Jersey would go back. New Jersey wouldn't flip red probably, but New Jersey would go back to having about half the seats. You would have 3rd district, 7th district would go to Trump. So, but what Victor said was that without a Congress, you're going to have it go to Pompeo. Pompeo is going to be the leader of the country, followed by Mnuchin, because Pompeo is the Secretary of State. We'll get to Arizona. Here's the one thing that I believe that Victor made a mistake on, and here's my corroborating evidence. Chuck Grassley is the president pro tempore of the Senate, which is basically the president of the Senate, technically the vice president's president of the Senate. But of course, the vice president was up for election, so he wouldn't count. So it would go 4th in line, ahead of the Secretary of State, which is 5th, is the president pro tempore of the Senate, Republican Chuck Grassley. The issue, I think, with Victor's analysis is that Grassley was not up for re-election. So Grassley is his seat is not like he would, as remaining president pro tempore of the Senate, he would become the next person, especially because at this point it seems as if the Republicans have maybe locked down the Senate. Now, I don't know this for certain, but here's some corroborating evidence. Two things. First, Grassley's got COVID and has disappeared through the end of the month at least. Okay, very, very convenient timing for Chuck Grassley to completely disappear. Chuck can't vote on anything. Chuck's gone. He's disappeared for a second. And then we have a Q post with a 3-year delta to this time period telling us, where's Chuck Grassley? Talking about how he's under protection. Okay? Never missed a vote until now. Very good point. So, Salman, chill. Chill, brother. Chill. We're good. We're good. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that stuff. No. Trump is going to be president. This is about if there's a delay. I can tell you guys, I do not see that happening. I don't see energetic evidence of it happening. I feel very, I've said it before. I think we go through the end of the month, and that's when the situation becomes very apparent to the left about the fact that they're actually starting to lose. And then we're going to have 2 weeks of, and I think that you might even have SCOTUS by the very, very beginning of December or late November rule on it. I think by the end of this week, we should have that case filed. Thursday or Friday, we should have an official SCOTUS case. Okay? We should have an official SCOTUS case. That's going to take a week or two to resolve, which leaves us a week or two after that. Once SCOTUS declares all sorts of shit with the election irregularities, blah, 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 we are going to go into chaos, absolute chaos. The left is going to unleash their minions. It is going to be, and I think that's when Trump throws in the military. That's when the Insurrection Act is declared. Trump doesn't have to go to SCOTUS. He doesn't have to go to SCOTUS, but he will go to SCOTUS. He will go to SCOTUS because SCOTUS gives him more legitimacy, institutional legitimacy, which is extremely important in these kind of situations when you are fighting for legitimacy. Victor talked about that he could just have Trump go up there on stage and reveal all the evidence, and Trump can do that, and he can play that card, and Trump can take his chances with the military and with the armed population. He can do it. He can win it. I want you guys to understand there are multiple paths to victory, but the best path to victory, and there's a minor gamble, and I say minor because we control the Supreme Court. We have five good people, 3 of which despise the left. Clarence Thomas. And remember, guys, Amy Coney Barrett's mentor was Antonin Scalia, who was executed. They killed Scalia, okay? And you better believe that she knows that. SCOTUS is the best way to go about doing this because SCOTUS is institutional legitimacy. And if Trump has institutional legitimacy that there are people across the country trying to steal the election, then Trump can declare the Insurrection Act with an incredible amount of support. And there are a lot of I'll call them legal cucks or whatever, people on the right or in the center who will be very much assuaged by this if Trump has the Supreme Court backing him. Frankly, I don't really care that much because I don't care what a corrupt judge says. I could care fucking less about what a corrupt judge says, but a lot of people care about that stuff. So having SCOTUS rule on it, it's very important, and I think that's what Trump will do. Trump can always dump the evidence later on, and he will do it. In fact, I think we're going to see most of the evidence in the Supreme Court because I think a lot of it's going to be televised. Tension equals focus. If you're tense about something, you focus on it, and there's energy. This means that everybody's going to focus on what SCOTUS is going on, what's going on in SCOTUS. The networks can't cut away from everything in SCOTUS. They can try to reframe it, but they can't cut away from it. Do I understand if Biden wins the Supreme Court is done? Yeah, well, that's another thing, right? If Biden wins, they're going to pack the court anyway. So do you think that anybody who's on a swing position there? I mean, we have a guaranteed 5 votes, guys. We have guaranteed 5 votes. And look, I want to make something very clear here. Those justices are good people. They're not corrupt. Okay? They're not corrupt individuals. If Trump didn't win this, they wouldn't vote for him. We can't say that about the left judges. They would not. They would not back Trump if Trump didn't win it. I want to really emphasize that. We are asking them to just simply, they are fulfilling law and justice with this, but they're also fulfilling the will of the people, and they're also fulfilling their own legacy in the court. So they have every incentive to do the right thing. Every incentive. How do we know Trump won? I'm just blocking these people. Just too fucking stupid. So fucking stupid. Like, don't like not my job for people to figure, like, it's so fucking obvious at this point. How do we know Trump won? How do we know? How do we know? You're brain dead. That we know that. We know you're brain dead. Gone, right? They're in a panic mode, guys. They're in a panic. They know Trump's not giving up. And believe me, I will tell you anything. If I can tell you guys anything, I will tell you that the left knows there was a lot of fraud committed. Now, they will tell themselves that Biden still won. And their internal monologue is that Biden won the election, but yeah, there was fraud, and they're afraid that Trump is going to focus on the fraud and overturn the election. That's their new narrative. They're not at this point disputing that there's fraud. There's a couple people who say this stuff, but they're not. They want to believe that Trump, still lost it, but they're afraid it's slipping because they know that what the left's doing. They know that all this stuff is really sketchy, and they're thinking to themselves, "Wait a minute, is he going to win this?" Guys, Trump and Brady had a connection for a reason. Okay, down in the fourth quarter by 30 points, and you win. They both know how to transmute energy. I don't want to get too much into it, but compare Melania and Giselle. Very similar energies there, right? They both have a little witch in their corner. But yeah, the left is believing their own lies, but they know they're going to lose, and that's why they know it. They know it because they just want him to concede. That's why they're obsessing upon it. They are obsessing about Trump conceding because the longer Trump stays in it, the more comes out and the more freaked out they get. That's it. That's it. It's a matter of will. And I have to emphasize this. If you look at groups of people that really, I mean, we've got three groups of people who are holding the line. Okay? We've got a handful of people in the manosphere based around, Anthony and I, right? A couple others as well, who are really just like, no, we're men. We're going to fight this. We're here. This is your country. Care about your country. Fight for your country. And then we've got the Q supporters who are completely impervious to demoralization campaigns. Completely impervious. People make fun of trust the plan. And I think it's a fun joke. I think it's a fun joke too. But the reality is that they don't get caught up in the blow by blow. They understand the big picture. They get tactical stuff wrong and they get the strategic stuff right. A lot of the people who are, conservative or anti-left kind of commentators, they get the tactics right. They have no idea about the strategy. They make a big deal about little court cases, little things. It doesn't fucking matter. Trump could go on television. He could host a news conference. Victor said this, and he's completely right. He could literally go and do a press conference and just have video screens showing all the evidence. They could cut the feed, but then everyone's going to be like, what was Trump saying? Then Trump has the emergency messaging system, and Trump can send out all the stuff. He can send out documents after document after document to every single American that they can make up their own mind. Okay? There's 0% chance we lose this unless you give up. That's the only way they win. So what do you have to do? You have to just fucking suck it up for a couple more weeks and not give up. And whenever they tell you to give up, you say, nope, not giving up. Sorry, you're wrong. We won, and we're gonna win, and your people are going to jail. That's it. That's the only answer to anything. Anything they say, no. Nope, not happening. we are in such a good position. We have so many cards we can play. The best card is SCOTUS, but we can always just burn the whole fucking thing down. We can wake people up very, very aggressively if we want to wake them up aggressively. So all the stuff in Georgia, all the stuff in Michigan, all the stuff in Pennsylvania, it doesn't matter, guys. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we have the goods, we have the outcome. Trust the plan is powerful energy. And the reason why it's powerful energy is because it allows you to not lose perspective. There's trust and faith. These are very high level things. They're very high level. It doesn't matter if there's QRS codes on the ballots. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That's a detail that doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that Trump was on this. Sidney Powell talked about it herself. 2018, Trump signs an executive order about foreign interference in the election. He used their own shit against them with the Russian collusion. He signed an executive order barring foreign interference in an election. Hey, guess what happened? We had all of our votes tabulated in either Barcelona or Frankfurt. Okay? Automatically fucked. Auto fuck. Now, we're not seeing Trump for a couple of reasons, and one of which is that he is under very serious threat right now. I think we have to, again, send power every single night. I pray two things: that you protect and send energy and power to Trump. Three things, actually. I sent a lot of love and energy to my wife, who's due in a month. and number three, I ask what I can do to help me to be a good person in this fight. Okay? But Trump's got this shit, man. He's got it. Trust the plan, man. It is trusting the plan because Trump's plan is God's plan because Trump is aligned with God. Trump is not a savior. I don't have a savior complex around Trump. I simply understand his role. I understand, and he understands his role too. So this is some big stuff. So let's shift gears a bit. I'm gonna mention a couple other things. So Arizona was mentioned here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Arizona real quick. Arizona had we have now evidence from, I even wrote on detail here. Kelly Dixon, assistant director of recruitment and training for Maricopa County, told workers there that for people who voted early, they would be given ballpoint pens, and for people who came on election day, they would be given Sharpies. Okay, Taylor Burrows, our own fucking Taylor Burrows, was given a Sharpie, so her vote was invalidated because the machine doesn't register Sharpies. So this was a deliberate attempt to fuck with the election totals. Deliberate attempt to disenfranchise day voting, which overwhelmingly favored Trump, which we all knew. Don't get bogged down in the details, guys. These little courts don't matter. Everybody who's corrupt is just revealing themselves. Is it accurate that Maricopa County accounts got 63% of the vote? I'm not familiar with that. We got, so Kane here. Another Sharpie here in Arizona on election day. To be honest, the Sharpie, well, the Republican Secretary of State is a McCain person, okay? So Arizona and Georgia are two states you got to be skeptical of. Republican Secretary of State was not really interested in doing much of a recount, not really interested in trying to fix these problems. I don't feel like we have a really clear answer on it. But guys, like it's very obvious that Trump won Arizona. That's not even up for question that he won Arizona. All the other stuff is just it's noise. It's noise. Well, Pelosi's easily reelected because Pelosi lives in San Francisco. So she's literally the congresswoman for San Francisco. So she's going to get reelected, but that doesn't have to do necessarily with her becoming the Speaker of the House, which doesn't have the votes for that. And also, as we said, the House went to Trump, so she's not Speaker regardless. Yeah, this is Siegfried's got a really good point here. GOP Dem. I mean, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm president. Put Speaker of the House in your bio now. Pelosi, the Democrats don't control the House of Representative, guys. Like, I love this stuff. This is like, it's like Joe Biden, office of the president elect. Nancy Pelosi, I'm Speaker of the House of Representatives. Whatever, say whatever the fuck you want. You can say whatever you want. Doesn't make it real. Doesn't make it real. When you've stolen scores of seats across the country, doesn't make it real. Doesn't matter. Like, just laugh at them. They're evil people. Gavin Newsom, after saying you can't see your family on Thanksgiving, goes to a dinner party at the French Laundry. Very fancy restaurant. Got some good friends who went there. I would love to go there myself. Big fan of that kind of, snob shit. That's what I do. I love it. I love fine dining. Okay. I'm not going to lie about it. I love fine dining, fine wine. It's my weakness. Newsom talking about how, we all make mistakes. Come on, man. Come on, man. It's not a mistake, obviously. But there are going to be some dumb people who show up in this chat or who troll, say online, well, how do you know? How do you know it wasn't a mistake? Just no brain whatsoever. Brain pouring out their nose, whatever's left of it is just liquid dripping out saliva out their mouth. Ugh. Stupid fucking people. Good for us that they have zero energy to them. They can't do anything. They're literally just completely drained dry, completely harvested people. Yeah, wear masks in your homes. They are completely dropping their own mask. They're telling you exactly what they want. Are you going to wake up? Are people going to wake up? Whatever. So, what happened in Michigan was bullshit. But we're fine, guys. We're fine. Now, there's a couple other things that I want to talk about here. Okay? A couple other things I want to talk about here. First off, just want to close off some of these other things here. Oh yeah, there's a couple big stuff. All right. So first off, Department of Homeland Security statement saying there were no security concerns. Right? Remember that? Everyone was freaking out. CISA said this. Department of Homeland Security said there was no problems. And I was like, guys, it's fake news. Fake news from hacks. They quote a bunch of hacks. Well, guess what? It was even worse than that. Because members on the Department of Homeland Security, on this board, on this advisory board, were members of Dominion. Okay? Dominion also, one of the people on the board of Dominion was also on Biden's transition team. And they're also connected to the Clinton Foundation. They're stupid. No fucking ability to cover their tracks whatsoever. But as we said, they lost big. They lost at such a margin, they couldn't cover it up. Everything's super sloppy. Now, a couple other little things here. A little funny one we can mention. Trump made CISA. Yeah, he made CISA. And, it remains to be seen how much on the surface this was about trying to, there's a lot of disinformation. Again, we can get caught up in the details with this stuff. Guy today got fired. I don't remember if he was involved with CISA or some other cyber security branch. I think it was CISA, though. And he got kicked out today because he was saying, oh, there's no fraud. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. It was caught. And I'm going to emphasize something right here about how it was caught. So we have Chris Miller, the new acting Secretary of Defense, okay? Chris Miller, Krebs, that was it. Oversaw CISA, yeah. Gone. It doesn't matter. Acting Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller, has now removed the CIA from all military intelligence briefings. Completely removed them. So now whenever special ops, which is, remember, goes directly to the president through the Secretary of Defense, whenever special ops does a little meeting, maybe they're going to scoop up some people in the coming weeks. CIA isn't able to go and tell them ahead of time, hey, they're going to scoop you up. They're not going to give misinformation because they're not going to know. The CIA, and I presume pretty soon the FBI, completely cut out of the loop. They're not going to be getting any access. They're going to be an isolated part of the government bureaucracy. Very, very big stuff here. Very, very big stuff. Okay? The CIA no longer has access to special operations. They don't have it anymore. So Haspel, CIA guy, poor little Haspel. Poor little Haspel. You know, he's fucked. He's fucked. Like the rest of them, they're fucked. I don't know exactly about DHS, but CIA, FBI, look, leadership at least. You know, you could say 80, 90% of the agents are good people. Frankly, that's what Robert Steele says. I think it's a good argument to be made. The reality is that in any group, you have a small amount of criminals, a small amount of patriots, and a ton of just fucking cowards who go with the flow. And I'm frankly, yeah, Gina Haspel. I'm I'm frankly kind of I don't give a shit, honestly. If you knew about this stuff and you were in intelligence and you continue to just go along with it, I don't think that you're evil, I just think you're weak. I don't think you're worthy of the position. I don't think you're worthy of being in that and I think that I wouldn't say that I would blacklist them, but you're never going to be a leader. You're just nothing, really. You're nothing. You were you turned your eyes away from a crime that would destroy your country. Now, of course, intelligence is compartmentalized, so I'm not suggesting that every FBI or CIA agent knew everything that was going on. Okay, so let's be clear here. It's just nuance. You'd have to take it probably case by case. We have Ezra Cohen Watwick, who's now in the clandestine service part of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Okay, he's out there. Fucking killer, Ezra Cohen Watwick. I'm sure Ezra has been part of the people who infiltrate Antifa, but we'll see. We'll see. But we got Ezra close to the chest now. So you guys want to go on to some of the ET stuff, don't you? How do we prove fraud if all federal agencies under Trump are compromised? Well, not all federal agencies are corrupt, and I want to make this point right here. Is that true? E the friend was Ezra? That's really interesting. That's really interesting. I know that account. I didn't follow them crazy, but I'll check that out. I will have to find. I actually might even join Parler just to see what he's disclosing because I knew that he was. I knew that I've heard E the friend was very very much in the know. I had no idea it was Ezra Cohen Watwick. That's crazy. Not surprising, but that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, the very least, E the friend did have some really good intel. So I'm gonna check it out. Now, what was I saying here? Oh, what was that question? Let me check this out right here. Okay, so how do we prove all fraud if all federal agencies, even under Trump, are compromised? So there's a lot of federal agencies that are compromised, at least at the top, right? But the agency that isn't compromised is the agency, and this is what John F. Kennedy knew about all this stuff. John F. Kennedy knew about the CIA, which is why he created a parallel intelligence agency that was under the direct aegis of the president called the Defense Intelligence Agency, okay, which is where Flynn and Ezra and all of them came through, okay? Austin Steinbart, right, as well. All of them came through DIA. DIA is directly to the president. It's not a bureaucracy, not an administrative kind of bureaucracy like the various cabinets. They've been clearing out a lot of these people, especially in the high positions, the positions that matter. That's why you're seeing Esper, all these people getting fired in defense. But CIA, FBI, I think, are pretty bad, pretty corrupted among the elite, which is probably why they're going to be back. They're going to be pushed to the side with all this stuff. As for the other agencies, DHS, I think, is probably a mixed bag. NSA is probably a mixed bag. Again, but though, at this point, we've had years to monitor things, and we have the metadata from the Dragnet, right? We can check it. We can check all this stuff out. We can check it all out. So we're in a good Trump's in a good position with this. I mean, I maybe you want me to give you like an answer as if I was in the inside and I know that, well, this person or this person, but the rats are getting like kicked out of the administration. There is not going to be, when push comes to shove in the next 2 weeks, there is not going to be people in the administration who are going to be holding back everything here. They're not. They're not going to be there. Trump's going to be on full war footing, loyalists, competent people only in positions of authority. That's it. He's been kicking out the other ones. So the ET stuff. Okay, I'm not going to tell you guys I'm an expert on ET stuff. I'm not going to tell you guys Cash Money Patel is also there. I'm not going to tell you guys I'm an ET expert. There's a lot of the stuff that you get from people regarding ETs is channeled information, or people who, you can define that in different ways. People uh, who have had experience with them. But I'm going to tell you about a couple of things. I learned this from Jay Campbell and Robert Stanley. So you guys have heard maybe about Eisenhower. Remember, Laura Eisenhower's great-grandfather. Eisenhower was a good man. He tried to warn us about this. He didn't understand exactly how, until he was president, he didn't understand how infiltrated it had already become. Basically, to give you just a little mini history thing, Roosevelt was cabal. Roosevelt was all the same kind of thing as the royals. He considered himself royalty himself, which is why he stayed in power for so long, in part. Now, I don't think his cousin, Theodore Roosevelt, was like that, or great uncle. Families tend to split on left and right-hand path, but maybe, but I don't think so. At any rate, we're focused on FDR. So FDR, cabal, control of the government, the Overseas Secret Service, which was the precursor to the CIA. Basically, Roosevelt made the United States government infiltrated with international cabal in terms of the Rothschilds and the British royal family, and also connected to the client state of the cabal, the Soviet Union, which was, Nazi Germany was too, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, yeah, David Wilcox got some good stuff on this topic, although, as always, truth with error. So remember that, truth with error. So Roosevelt dies, and then you have Harry Truman, who, by the way, I love Harry Truman. I mean, it's, there's a couple people who, when you find out this stuff, you got to feel like you got to negotiate with. I really feel like Harry Truman was a good person. And in my research of the cabal, I have not found any evidence to the contrary of this. But, not the little trash, my guy, Truman. Harry Truman was, let's just say he was throwing the ticket for completely bigger macro political purposes. Okay. Harry Truman was kind of like a Midwestern, just rando. Okay. He's kind of like a Mike Pence kind of situation. He was a good guy from the Midwest, really, honorable, amazing family history, out of his element in DC, out of his element as president. I remember this. Again, I told you guys before, when you go through history stuff, when you go through history with a cabal lens, it's amazing how you reinterpret certain situations. I actually teared up when I read this passage in the Truman biography. I thought it was so good. When Truman finds out that Roosevelt died and he became president, and, the scene of him kind of running down the Senate aisles, Senate to being escorted, where they take him to the White House and he's sworn in immediately. And then the second he's sworn in as president, they tell him about the nuclear program. Like, he was out of the loop completely. And he was a guy who was high integrity. They brought him on in the election to secure the South in the election because people were getting a little tired of FDR, even in the Democratic Party. And he becomes president, has no idea what's going on. He has no idea about his position. So he was being run by the people Roosevelt had pretty much put in place. And it makes a lot more sense now. One of the things that Truman was criticized for was the fact that he brought in a bunch of his friends later on, and they had all sorts of issues, and they gambled and they were kind of embarrassing. And they're like, well, Truman was too much of a loyalist. But I get it now. Truman probably felt like he had nobody who he could trust. And there's a whole thing with Truman and the creation of Israel. So you look at these things in a new historical context, but it certainly turns Truman into an individual who, because he was so out of his element, he wasn't a bad person, but you can't say that he was this like unreal president. He was a good man. He was an all-American man, but he could not comprehend really the full apparatus that Roosevelt had put in place. And I'm sure that they were happy with having him because he was pliable, right? He was pliable. Then you have Eisenhower, American general, right? Eisenhower, American general, good person. And then you have this situation. Now, basically what happened is after we started doing nuclear tests, this is when all the UFO sightings happened. Okay, this is when they all happened. This is when they all started to drop down. Central Otago's open up a bit more, a little bit better. All these UFO sightings, right? Area 51. What happened? Well, what happened was that we had been monitored for a long time by different groups. Okay, we had been monitored by different groups, and I'll just say this about Truman. Truman was 33rd degree, I think. It's possible. I mean, or maybe you're right. I mean, I'm not going to say I can't recall that from the biography, but maybe it was not added in the biography. I'm quite aware at this point that biographies are selective, and what they will completely reframe things. I can just tell you that from what I've read about Truman, it's very hard to imagine him as anything other than a patsy, because he never had agency. Even when he was in Missouri, he never had agency. He was the the high integrity judge who was put in place by the mob boss who ran St. Louis, or not St. Louis, Kansas City. So he was very loyal to people, and he was a very high integrity person, and they used him for their own purposes. That's been the story of his career, was people using a high integrity person. He's ISTJ, using a high integrity person for nefarious means, because they know that he would go by the book and he would make them look good, right? But also that he wouldn't betray his friends. So he could have been a Mason, whatever, but Truman's not the kind of person, you don't gather from his psychology any sort of like, I'm got this plan. A lot of these presidents were not like in on it. They were just used because they were easy to manipulate, right? I don't think Grant was another example of this. Grant was not a bad person. Grant was a very good person, but had no bigger perspective, easy to manipulate by people who did this stuff. So you have all these nuclear weapons dropping, and what happened is that you started to see a lot of UFO sightings, and the reason for that is because extraterrestrials, etc., and we'll get the details about this, but they knew this wasn't a good situation. Okay, nuclear weapons with a civilization that had just had a massive world war that killed 80 million people, maybe. This isn't a good situation. Okay, this isn't a good situation because they could destroy the entire planet. They could nuke themselves to smithereens. And so, if ETs were ever going to intervene, that was the time. They would often wait and allow us to have our own development. And I'll talk about that own development in a second. Actually, I'll talk about it now to give it perspective. So, why didn't ETs intervene earlier? This is a very complicated topic, and take it very lightly. Do your own research. I would not say that there's any sort of consistent narrative with this, but the one that seems to make the most sense, ones that resonates the most. And I'm leaving out a lot of details here, but I want to get to the main point, which is that you had a group called reptilians, okay, and they are Draco. They're often called Draco reptilian. If you guys want to read a bunch of weird shit, check out the Ruiner blog, the Ruiner, Shane Bales or Bates, I think. And I remember a couple of years ago just reading like 3 days straight, just 2 days straight, just reading every single one of those posts to somebody who apparently worked for them. Okay. But these groups gain control over Earth. Now, I'm going to spare you that sort of early conversation about how this came to be, about whether they were the Anunnaki, whether they mimicked the Anunnaki. But suffice to say that the gods indicated in Sumerian times and in the Bible as well, when you talk about the Nephilim, there is basically that we're talking about the same people, right? Whether the reptilians decide to take the label of the Anunnaki and they actually weren't, it's tons and tons of disinformation here. It's tough to say. But Prometheus talks about this, about the manipulation of our DNA. The Book of Enoch talks about this in the extended Bible, I guess you could say. Yeah, thank you for saying this. This is people who are like, oh, you're crazy. How can you talk about this stuff? Well, again, you may think it's crazy, but they don't. Hillary got caught in her emails talking about the tomb of Gilgamesh and the Nephilim. Where's the tomb of Gilgamesh? That's a fact. That was in WikiLeaks. Fact. Hillary Clinton, where's the tomb of Gilgamesh? Where are the Nephilim buried? Okay. So these different groups that we see here have been controlled by the Draco reptilians, as you want to call them. Something happened with Earth, and I've heard this as like a international sort of treaty. There have been wars between the Pleiadians and between the reptilians. And not simply just those two groups. There's also the avians, etc. There's different groups. I want to just focus on Pleiadians and reptilians because I think that that's most clarifying. But the Pleiadians and the reptilians have been fighting for a while. The Pleiadians, by all accounts, look like Nordics. Okay, so you can argue that there's a lot of esoteric history that talks about the Nordic gods as being, the Nordic gods were a different kind of gods. They were different ETs who existed. Yeah, so we have to talk about big God with a G, big G O D versus lowercase G O D S when we talk about historiography, because there's characters who were, ETs who were gods, and then there is the higher God, which is more of what Christianity and the Abrahamic religions are referring to. So you have this whole situation here, and they war with each other. Now something happened. There was some treaty, and basically, Earth was like conceded, at least temporarily, to the reptilians. That they controlled the planet, and that was it, right? And they harvested the reptilians. And there's a whole other thing with this with the Archons. I'll talk about the Archons in the next Periscope on COVID Cabal. But that the reptilians basically were harvesting people here. They were harvesting them for energy and as slaves. They create a net, so when you would die, basically, so when you would die, you remember the whole thing like, I see the white light? That was a false light. That was a false light. From what I've understood, that's a false light. Now, I've also heard it's been broken up since then, but basically souls were trapped. You've heard the term prison planet? It was literally a prison planet. A soul that came to Earth could not leave, or would have to be very, very wise to leave, because they'd have to be able to discern the trap. So every single time you died, instead of being able to reincarnate elsewhere or do whatever, stay within source energy, you would seek the light and you'd get pulled right back in to being reincarnated on Earth again, and where they could harvest your energy again in another life cycle. And they controlled the Earth for a while. So you look at, like, and this is my understanding of this stuff. You look at Christ. Christ was kind of like D-Day. Pleiadian kind of source energy dropped down because the Pleiadians, because of contractual agreements, there are certain things they couldn't do. It's like a war treaty. They had been fighting in wars for a while, and basically you had a figure who came down, and you could maybe argue there are other figures too, but I'm going to strictly speak about what I know. And Christ was kind of like a D-Day situation where he came down here and seeded consciousness for tons and tons of individuals. And that seeding consciousness created a gradual buildup that, you know, that would ultimately undermine the cabal. This is the whole thing with, what was going to be the end game, right? About how this is the devil's world. Satan controls this world. I don't even know about Zuckerberg. I think he's a clone. He looks very different now than he used to look, guys. He looks very different. Look at early pictures of Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg looked like a dweeb, but he looked like a human. He doesn't look like a human anymore. It really looks weird. Really looks weird. So you have all this stuff, the Pleiadians, with Jesus and Christ consciousness and Christianity seeing this stuff, building things up. Okay. And then you fast forward to the Eisenhower administration, and the Eisenhower administration was apparently approached by two different groups of ETs. Now, there's a lot of debate about this, what this actually meant. Were they two sides of the same coin? But basically, you had two groups. You had the Pleiadians who offered us all sorts of advanced technology in exchange for giving up the nukes. And then you had the Greys, who have been commonly described as sort of avatars. They're the ones that look like the little ET face. The Greys who asked us for to basically give them people to experiment on. Now, there's a whole thing with this, and ultimately the government chose to go with the Greys because they didn't want to give up their nukes. And that's the whole thing's about people being experimented on by aliens. There's a lot of debate, guys. There's a lot of debate about whether or not they were two sides of the same coin, whether it was all a big trap. But what's going on right now is that let's say the galactic situation's changed, and there's been fights between these groups across timelines, and the Pleiadians are assisting Trump. Majestic 12, right? Majestic 12 was a group of 12 individuals who were connected, who basically interacted with this group. And that we're in a position now where we're in a position now where it's the end game for the reptilians. They've been basically told to leave the planet. And that's when we talk about the Stargate, the gate closed. Like, those who didn't accept the deal and leave are going to get trapped and fucked. They're going to get killed. A lot of the reptilians, from what I understand, have left already. And what's left is a lot of their family lines. So a way to look at this, if you were to take a Lord of the Rings analogy, is that like Melkor was sent away, and all you had left is Sauron, right? Or Sauron sent away. All you have left are the remaining orcs. I think that Sauron being left, though, is a good way to describe like the families, the bloodlines, exactly. Well, Melkor was defeated a while ago. Sauron's left to be defeated, but they're lieutenants. They don't have the same power level. Yeah, Court of Orion. There's a lot of different. I mean, I'm just trying to give you guys an overview right now. We can talk more about it, but if you're talking about two primary groups, it's the Pleiadians and the Reptilians, and they've been at war. The Reptilians have a consciousness that, again, we'll talk more about it later because there's nuance here, but Reptilians are more parasitic. At least they become more parasitic, and it's big war. And we're part of the bigger war that's been going on. It's a very important planet Earth. So there's a different lens you can view the fights here on. But Trump has support from... Trump's not alone. Let's put it that way. Trump's not alone. So anyway, guys, we'll talk later. I'll